After I published my video on 4 Vedas, Mr. Pradeep Kumar had sent 2 video links via comment space regarding smelting. The second video interested me as it describes iron smelting using primitive technique by African people. Siva was the first smelter and he documented it in Ruk Veda. It was Siva who discovered gold and it was called Kovam in Tamil and Kov in Slovak as it was discovered by Siva the king. Ko means king in Tamil. After gold, it was iron that was smelted next and not copper as it has been wrongly believed by the West till now. This is because of the fact that the melting fuel charcoal also reduces the iron into its elemental form as it is more attracted to oxygen than iron's attraction to oxygen. This video shall stand as a further proof that Shiva smelted iron and documented it in Ruk Veda. The original video was unnecessarily too long, consuming 1 hour and 45 minutes to watch. We edited the video and shortened it without any loss of information to run just for about 45 minutes. It is definitely worth watching.
In May 2005, a group of elder men of the Bamogo family of smiths in Burkina Faso gathered to smelt iron for the first time in over 60 years. These were men who had seen the process when they were young, and a few of the oldest had actually done it themselves. They were supported and organized by a much younger member of the family, Jacob Bamogo, who filmed this with the help of his nephew Abdoulaye. The smelting took place in the village of Dablo, in northern Burkina Faso, north of Kaya and at the edge of the Sahel. Burkina Faso is a small landlocked country north of Ghana and between Mali to the northwest and Niger to the northeast. Africans have been making iron for well over 2,000 years. The manufacture of high-quality carbon steel allowed Africans to produce effective weapons for warfare and efficient tools for farming. Without iron technology, the spread of agriculture and of developed civilizations across Africa would not have been possible. By the beginning of the 20th century, when the first French colonials arrived in Burkina Faso, then called Upper Volta, they found a thriving iron smelting industry, by which tons of high-quality metal were produced every year. Within a few decades, the French began to use trucks and automobiles on the roads they forced their subjects to construct. When the first French auto smashed at a high rate of speed into a huge mahogany tree by the side of the road, the smelting industry died, for smiths could find a cheap and plentiful source of good metal. Forging continued, but smelting ended. Since the 1960s, merchants have imported large quantities of inexpensive mass-produced iron from China and Japan, and no iron has been smelted from raw ore anywhere in Africa for almost 50 years. The technology documented on this film is the first smelting of iron from ore in Burkina Faso since the 1960s. Very special hardwood with high caloric content is selected. The fuel is as important to the smelting process as the iron itself. Special charcoal is used that has a very high BTU content. Jacques Bamogo, one of the senior smith elders, has specialized in charcoal burning all of his life. He and his younger helpers go into the wilderness some distance from Dablo to find suitable hardwood trees that will produce the best charcoal. These are cut, stacked, and burned. Jacques Soba is showing us how he lights the charcoal using a flint and steel instead of white man's matches.
Et maintenant, on met le coton à pris feu, que vous voyez comme ça. Voilà. Et maintenant, on met ça à la direction du vent et il va faire son travail. Donc, vous voyez, c'est déjà pris. Le feu est déjà prêt. Ça a pris feu. Et voilà. Voilà. Donc, l'enfant
The wind has come up and is causing problems, because it will make the wood burn unevenly. The Bamogos stack leafy branches upwind to block the wind. Jacob does not have a windscreen for his microphone, so there's a lot of wind noise on the video. They use a fork called a rayaka to push the wood back into the fire, so it will all burn nicely. As soon as all of the wood is lighted, the men begin to cover or smother the wood with sand, so that the heat will turn the wood into charcoal without consuming it. By smothering the wood as it burns, oxygen is excluded. Molecular water is driven from the wood, reducing it to charcoal without oxidizing it and turning it to useless ash. 4 days later, they return to the pile and remove the sand covering, revealing the high-quality hardwood charcoal they need for successful smelting. The tool that is used to uncover the charcoal is called sandore. They have uncovered it all so they can take it home. They're loading it into baskets to carry back home. They carry the charcoal back to Dablo in baskets. All the charcoal is dumped at the workplace. People greet them with, "Welcome, you've done a good job." This is the group of Bamogo elders from the village of Dablo, west of Kaya, who made the smelting possible. Iron is made of iron ore. The elders begin the process by locating a source of ore, in this case a pit they and their ancestors have used decades earlier. The ore is excavated by hand in baskets and is sorted by quality, removing as much clay as possible. It is then carried back to the village of Dablo, where the chunks of ore are broken open, the nuggets of pure iron are removed, and as much clay and impurities as possible are discarded. 2 full baskets of high-quality ore are needed for 1 kiln. Here Razinga Bamogo and the other elders are discussing how and where they will mine the ore. Here Jacques Soba and another elder are getting ready to mine the ore from a shallow pit not far from Dablo. Among the most honored and respected scholars of West African archaeology is Professor Jean-Baptiste Kientega of the University of Ouagadougou. Professor Kientega has published extensively on both iron and gold mining and technology, and is perhaps in part motivated in his interest in iron by the fact that he comes from one of the 2 very large smith clans in the Mosi area, the other being the Bamogo family. Professor Kientega has discovered an archaeological site associated with smelting that dates to 365 to 220 BC, which indicates that smelting developed independently in Burkina Faso. Although Burkina is covered with red, iron-rich soil, it is not always easy to locate good sources of iron ore. In some areas it is said that after a rain you can see smoke rising from iron deposits. Other people, including the Senefo and Bois, use a metal rod to prospect for iron ore. In Mosi country, iron ore is usually mined in pits or shallow mines that may have connecting galleries. The miners from several villages make use of common ore pits. Smiths are readily able to distinguish ores that will yield high-quality steel to be used in weapons, as distinct from low-quality ore to be used only for hoes. 3 types of ore are available in Burkina. The best is magnetite, Fe3O4, which is about 43 to 70% iron. This is difficult to find in much of Burkina. The second grade is red hematite, Fe2O3, which is about 40 to 65% iron. The least useful is brown hematite, or limonite, Fe2O3 NH2O, which is 40 to 60% iron. This is easy to find all across Burkina. 2 types of furnaces are used in Burkina. In the center and north are tall furnaces that use bellows to force air into the fire. Some of these, among the Bois, once reached a height of 1.5 to 6 meters. This is the type used by the Bamogos. Another type, partially sunk into the ground and much smaller, produces a very small amount of iron. This is good quality magnetite, rich in iron. The elders are cleaning and sorting the ore from the surrounding clay. The kernels of good ore are called zospinga, or hyena turds. They've cleaned the 2 full baskets they need for each of the 2 furnaces they are building. This is the way they will carry it back to the village. This is the ore ready for the furnace. The darker the ore, the higher the iron content. The second important mineral that is needed is an alkaline deposit that is also close to the town. This material is a stony material that, when mixed with the ore in the smelting, allows the iron to melt at a much lower temperature and to flow together, separating from the slag or impurities. This flux is also mined near the town and carried to Dablo in baskets. The stones that are gathered and mixed with the ore to make it flow easily are called O stones. This is the flux, ready to be mixed with iron ore and placed in the furnace. The furnace and tubes are made of clay, which itself is fireproof and durable. Not just any clay will do. The Bamogo smiths use clay from termite mounds, which is especially useful because it is free of stones and other impurities. The termites simply are not strong enough to incorporate stones in their structures. Those who have studied African art know that the Igbo in Nigeria and many other peoples across Africa believe that clay from termite mounds is sacred because it comes from deep in the sacred earth. If you look closely at the clay in the basket, you can see the tunnels the termites have left. The elders break up the mounds and carry the pieces back to Dablo, where they pound the chunks into finer clay. The women are drawing water to be mixed with the clay from the village's main well over 30 meters deep. The well was dug and lined with concrete with the help of an American Peace Corps volunteer more than 35 years ago. The water is quite clean and safe to drink.
Ce puits que vous voyez, c'est le grand puits. Il a au moins 30 mètres de profondeur.
The elders are breaking the clay into fine pieces so it will absorb water evenly. 2 deep pits are dug, and the clay is mixed with water so that the liquid is absorbed or slaked into the clay uniformly. This is a large bundle of the special fine straw from the wilderness that would be broken up to mix with the clay.
Ça peut s'éclater et puis retomber. Donc voilà pourquoi on met la paille dessus.
The 15 to 17-year-old girls help out by bringing water.
Alors on met un peu d'eau dans le trou. Et à ce moment d'autres font la boue ici. La boue est déjà prête, donc on ne fait que...
They wet the clay over there and then put it in this pit here. They gather it by hand and put it in the pit. They fill the pit up completely.
On met de l'eau encore, des petits morceaux qui ne seront pas bien mouillés. Donc voilà pourquoi on laisse ça.
If it is not left to soak long enough, there will be little chunks that are not wet. They use Sanongo straw so there will be no cracks in the walls. They use the same water to clean their hands. Lots of water all over. They mix the clay and water in the pits and let it soak overnight. A cap of fine straw is placed over the clay while it soaks to keep the hot sun off. They leave the fine straw on top to keep the bright hot sun off the moist clay so it won't dry out. The next day, when all of the water is absorbed, the straw is kneaded into the clay. Large amounts of fine straw are used. During the heating, the straw turns to carbon, leaving fine voids, allow the clay to expand and contract without cracking with changes of temperature. Jacob remarks in the video that the straw makes the clay stronger, which is true, but because it gives the walls of the furnace flexibility when exposed to extreme heat. The process you are about to watch is the construction of the cylindrical furnace, the tubes or tuyères, and the bellows, which are then assembled for the smelting. These are millet stalks around which the furnace will be formed. What are you making there? We're stripping bark to bind the stalks. My name is Bamogo Jaksoba, and this is Bamogo Laro. What would you like to do there? We're going to build the tall furnace.
C'est la paille qu'on dépose par terre. Les petits milles. Paille.
On fine straw. Then we put the millet stalks on top and take a few off so it's not too thick around. It is all bound up into a cylinder the same dimensions as the inside of the furnace. Traditionally, this is how they're tied.
On va soulever et puis pour que le bas puisse être identique.
They pick it up and tap it against the ground so the ends will all be even. The wet clay from the termite mounds is kneaded with copious amounts of fine straw. It is kneaded with straw to make it stronger.
Ça soit très... Et toi-même? Maintenant, ils vont commencer à construire la construction du haut fourneau. Et maintenant, c'est comme ça qu'ils commencent la construction.
Now they are ready to begin to build. This is the building of the tall furnace. The clay is applied around the straw mold to form the cylindrical furnace. Why are you putting that thing in there?
Ne soit pas plus petit que le bas, pour que ça garde la même forme puissante.
To open it up so the top is closer in form to the bottom.
Pour garder, pour ouvrir un peu.
It's going to expand the size of the top so the top will be the same size as the bottom. We will smooth it out so it looks nice. They add more straw so it won't break. When it is dry, they will pull out the stalks. They are kneading the clay with straw to make a clay body they can use to build the parts of the furnace. Now they spread the clay over an overturned jar, so it will take the form of the jar.
Après, on met de la paille pour...
They add the claws around the edges, so they will not dry out, because they will continue the building afterward.
Ils ont pris le torchon pour couvrir le bord, pour que ça ne cesse pas, parce qu'ils vont...
They are using the clay straw mix to form the tubes around a smooth stick. The stick forms the channel through which the air will flow. The French word for tubes is tuyères, which is the term that is used universally by archaeologists who find remains of these objects in archaeological sites as evidence of smelting ages ago. I think it is particularly important that all of this video was filmed by Jacob and Abdoulaye Bamogo. I was not even there, although I wish I had been. This means that they alone have decided what is important and have filmed it, and they have decided what questions to ask. This gives the video a particularly African voice that I think is important. I hope that in years to come the Bamogos and others in Burkina Faso will make more videos like this themselves. These are small nozzles or funnels to direct the air into the kiln. Sacrifices of millet water, beer, and chickens are offered to ask the spirits to watch over the enterprise and to give the work success. The spirits are asked to drink the beer and eat the chicken, and in return to bless the project. If you dislike seeing chickens getting their throats cut, please close your eyes and count to 20 slowly. I'm afraid a chicken was injured during the filming of this sequence. Yeah, it's good, hold him. If the chicken dies on its back, the spirits accept the sacrifice. As you can see, Jacques Silva makes sure the chicken dies on its back.
On enlève le torsion, on retourne ça doucement. Doucement.
The claws are removed, and what will be the base of the bellows is carefully turned right side up so the walls can be built higher, and a rim added. The jar is removed from the inside.
On enlève doucement le canari. Maintenant, c'est la fin de la construction.
The stalks and straw are carefully removed from inside the furnace. Now 2 elders, including Razinga Bamogo on the right, cut the opening through which the air will pass and the iron will emerge. The opening is carefully shaped of fresh clay. This is a hole that permits God to see inside the furnace. They have now completed the furnace. This is the completed furnace minus the bellows. Now it is time carefully to assemble the bellows, tuyères, and furnace.
Maintenant, comme ils ont fini de construire les soufflants, ils ont mis les 2 raccords qui permettent la sortie de l'air jusqu'au fourneau. C'est ça qu'ils sont en train de faire.
The kiln is assembled piece by piece. The clay tubes, or tuyères, are pushed through holes in the bellows and fixed in place with fresh clay. The bellows and tuyères are attached to the furnace so that the air forced out of the bellows will enter the base of the furnace. They have attached the tubes in the bellows. These must dry for 7 days before being moved. Jacques Sobe uses a flint and steel to light the inside of the furnace, just as their ancestors did. This will burn out the straw stubble inside the furnace and heat the furnace so it will dry completely. To heat the inside of the furnace so it will dry. That way, when the ore is burned tomorrow, it will be easy. As you can see, the Bamogos actually made 2 furnaces. The first was fired successfully several days before the official smelting, so that they would be sure that they had gotten it right when the official guests arrived. The last steps are to assemble the furnace and bellows. Now that they have completed the furnace, they attach the tubes to the bellows, which will carry the air to the tall furnace. Goat skins are tied to the top of each bellows in such a way that there is a flap, or opening, that opens up on the upstroke and closes on the downstroke, trapping the air and forcing it through the tubes. The elder Razinga Bamogo is a specialist in this step and personally supervises the attaching of the hides. You can see where the hide is folded on the left and right to form the valve through which the air enters the bellows. Strips of rubber inner tube are used to bind the hides in place. Jacques Sobe helps Razinga make adjustments. He announces the furnace is ready to begin smelting the next day. The climactic step in the process is the actual smelting. A senior elder pours alternating layers of charcoal and a mix of ore and flux into the top of the furnace. The furnace is lit, and the young men of the village take turns pumping the bellows as hard as they can for hours on end. There is a great deal that can go wrong at this point after days of preparation. The fire may not reach a temperature high enough to melt the ore, or the furnace may crack, or worse collapse, spreading sparks and incandescent slag and ore all over the area. Large numbers of people have gathered from local communities and from the capital, Ouagadougou, which is about 150 miles away. This is an important event. Burkinabés are curious about their cultural history, and faculty and students from the University of Ouagadougou attend to see this reenactment of an important technology. These are bowls of zumcom, or millet water with sugar, that the young men will drink as they work at the bellows. An elder offers some as sacrifices to the spirits by splashing it on the furnace. A Mosi flautist plays a praise song associated with smithing. You hear the Moray word boaaga repeatedly. This is the word for iron furnace. One of the few senior elders who still has the strength takes a turn at the bellows. You can hear that the university students are speaking French, not Moray, because some of them are not Mosi and don't understand Moray. This is the point where the air from the bellows enters the furnace. All of the smith elders and senior people from the community are wearing their best clothes when they attend the smelting. At this point, most of their work is done, and it's now up to the strong young men at the bellows to bring final success to the project. The elder in purple is the chief of Dablo. He and other chiefs wear the very distinctive hats that are unique in all of Africa to Mosi chiefs. There is ample evidence that chiefs have been wearing these hats since at least the 16th century. It is quite evident how hard these men are working as they pump the bellows. Much patience is needed as an elder inspects the furnace through a small opening at the base to see if, based on the color of the flame, the temperature is right. The young men pump and then pump some more. They eat from a bowl of millet water and sugar, very high in carbohydrates, and pump some more. They wait as more ore flux mix or more charcoal are added, and pump some more. Musicians play their flutes, and praise songs about the strength and ability of the smiths are sung, and they pump some more. He re-energizes himself with zumgom. The first traces of liquid slag appear at the base of the furnace. Flames emerge from the very base of the furnace. The very bright liquid that looks like lava from Kilauea volcano is in fact slag, not iron. The iron never gets quite hot enough to flow this freely. A big audience of students, elders, men and women, children, police and government officials are drawn by an event they feel is very important. Many of the students are archaeology students who often find broken tuyères, slag and bits of furnace in the sites they excavate. This smelting helps them understand the process that created those artifacts. Heat and poisonous fumes pour from the hole through which God watches the inside of the furnace. There's a pause while more charcoal and ore are added to the kiln. Late in the afternoon, after 10 hours of pumping, a solid lump or bloom of iron has formed at the bottom of the furnace, where the heat is almost white hot. The end is in sight. A large lump of slag is shoved aside. The furnace breathes like a dragon as it gives up a throbbing mass of slag and iron. The front of the furnace is broken off to reveal the large bloom of iron, weighing almost 30 pounds, nestled among the glowing charcoal. The mass of new iron is dull gray on the outside and incandescent red on the inside. It is rough because it has never completely liquefied, but in the heat of the furnace it has fallen to the bottom of the furnace through the charcoal and slag, where it has formed a large single mass. The audience shows their appreciation and perhaps relief that it has turned out well. While the lump of new iron is still hot and soft, the elders drag it from the furnace and cut it into slabs with a wedge and hammer. The smiths then forge it into the shape of a useful tool or weapon in their sacred forge, heating the iron red hot, then pounding it with traditional round hammers, heating again, hammering, heating, and hammering. Near the end, the shape is broadened into wings that the smiths bend over to form the socket, and finally the edge is hammered as sharp as possible before the hoe blade is attached to the carved wooden handle. Here the iron bloom is being cut into slabs with a wedge. The slabs will be forged into iron hoes. As usual, Jacques Bamogo is right in the midst of the action. Now the smiths carry the chunk of iron to the forge, where it is again heated to yellow hot. The bellows are similar but smaller than the large bellows used in smelting. The surround for the forge is an old steel rim from a large truck. Two senior smiths pull the hot iron from the fire and begin to shape it on the anvil. Their round hammers are very old-fashioned and traditional. Contemporary smiths more often use hammers made in China. This is called pumping iron. One smith holds the iron on the anvil with tongs while they both hammer it into shape. When the iron is no longer soft enough, it is reheated. First, the raw iron is formed into a flat rectangle. Then each end is flared to form the blade and the socket. This very strong, vigorous pounding flares one end to form the socket. The iron will be rested on these two hammers as the socket is shaped. Now the smiths bend the socket around the handle of a hammer to give it a good uniform shape. Now they thin and flare the blade of the hoe and begin to form an edge. Another smith is carving the handle. Smiths are usually the carvers of wooden masks and other sacred objects in African communities because they have responsibility of carving handles for the tools they make. The final shaping of the edge of the hoe. The handle is tried for the first time. The hot iron burns into the wood, shaping it to fit tightly. The blade is cooled in water.
Du charbon ordinaire, si vous voulez. Du charbon de quel bois.
Late in the afternoon, after the iron has been smelted and the tools have been forged, the community of Dablo and the invited guests celebrate the successfully completed project.
C'est pour Monsieur le ministre.
The chief of Dablo presents a completed hoe to the representative of the Minister of Culture. Jacques Bamogo, who has taken on so many responsibilities over the past weeks, presents a completed hoe to Professor Kientega. To close the ceremonies, the famous Mosi Warba dancers perform for the honored guests. It is interesting that their clappers and bangles are made of iron. A musician blows a trumpet made of antelope horn. Finally, the last of the guests shake hands and greet each other and depart for Ouagadougou.